Alright, so tonight we're here, we're a few minutes late with some technical difficulties to review the River Cog regional housing needs assessment. So as you're aware, we had a housing plan, now we're going to a regional housing plan. I'm Chris Costa, town planner, Nick Prevost, who is one of the housing representatives for the town for regional housing. Robin just joined, but this is her first meeting. So Nick and I will be presenting. So what I provided you with, we were told we could get through this in an hour. There's about 50 slides. So we're going to go a little speedy. And then we're going to take a few breaks for discussion and questions. In front of you, you have some questions to think about. What we're going to do with this discussion is the region has prepared this and we're looking for feedback for things that you may not necessarily believe are correct, just from your local knowledge and experiences, as well as comments. So do your findings align with what you see locally and so forth? So in the essence of time, in the 7 o'clock planning meeting, we're going to continue. I also distributed to you a regional housing needs assessment deliverables timeline. The proposal is to have this completed by June of 2027. Right now, we're in phase 1 of baseline and data updates. That was supposed to be completed by June, so we are here in August, so I suspect this timeline will get continued. We've also provided you with a handout with the existing condition summary for Old Saybrook with some demographic workforce housing market information. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to kind of jump into this presentation. So, and then there'll be some breaks where if you can just take a look at those questions or things that come up, Joanne is going to summarize all of that, and then we'll put something together from the region. So right now, the baseline is that we're updating the regional housing plan. Demographics, housing characteristics, and economics is a little bit about what we're going to discuss tonight. So the region does have a disclaimer about the data. They use I was mispronounced this, the decennial census from 2020, and it can only be compared against other decennial 10-year interval data. The last comparable is 2020. We can't use the ACS 1-year estimates because we're using 5-year estimates. So we can use the most recent 2024 data and compare.
And just in case you're not aware, the ACS is the American Community Survey Census. Thank you. That was my question.
So the one thing, no survey or census data is exact. It's all an estimate, but that's okay. So what are demographics?
So demographics tell us about the people currently living in the region, and they help us make assumptions about the type of housing we need in order to support different groups. So we'll look at total population, total households, household size, age, and income. Let's take a look at population overview. Total population has risen from 2014 to 2024, a little over 300 people. The largest growth in population occurred between 2019 and 2024, rising about 5%. Key takeaways for this is housing is for households, not individuals. So that's a key thing to think about. And in 2024, population is arranged into approximately 4,672 households, a 10% increase since 2014. The average household size has gradually declined from 2.41 in 2014 to 2.14 persons per household, indicating a shift towards smaller household compositions. And overall, the data reflects gradual household growth alongside a trend towards smaller household sizes. Household size and composition. In Old Saybrook, the 2-person household remains the dominant household type across all years, and it continues to grow. One-person households is increasing. and it's starting to narrow the gap between the two-person household. The three-person household is on the rise in 2019 before declining sharply in 2024, while the four-person household is a decrease overall, but still surpasses the three-person household. Let's talk about age. The age structure shifts notably older over time, with strong growth in the 55 to 64 and 75 plus cohorts, while younger and midlife groups generally decline. The 45 to 54 cohort dropped sharply to under 1,000, while 25 to 44 remains relatively stable with a little bit of growth. Children and youth decline overall, with 5 to 17 falling the greatest, and under 5 slightly decreasing, reinforcing fewer younger households. School district enrollment. And the key takeaway is between 2014 and 2024, we saw a decline of 27%. The largest enrollment losses occurred between 2014 and 2020, after which enrollment relatively stabilized and then partially rebounds. So in summary, Saybrook's population is stabilizing after a period of decline. We're experiencing a complex age structure shift with growth at both ends, real young and 65 plus. And we remain a small household community, typically in the 1 to 2 person households. Any questions related to the four questions that we've thrown out earlier?
Or comments.
Or comments.
We need to take a minute or two. I know it's a lot of information to go through.
But the people versus households, like the number of households is up 10%. The population always looks flat, but that's, I think, a really key piece of data here. So that we have more households than we did, even though we don't necessarily have more people. And this, I didn't realize the school drop was quite so precipitous.
Yes.
That's a lot.
So you think about families moving out of town and 1 and 2 people households moving in. And that's why you see the households.
So aren't they also losing children that were going to school to go to private school?
That's a possibility with the school population,
That's
absolutely.
something you can note.
Yeah.
Is that in private school?
Yeah, have we, if we built more houses?
We're gonna get into that.
That's.
It's in here, yeah. Anything else? With that, we're gonna go on to housing.
So what are housing characteristics? This is what they're looking for, is for us to tell them our current housing supply, what it looks like, help us assess whether the supply of housing we has matches the needs of our population. So we're going to talk about total units, unit type, size, age, condition, and tenure renter owned. The total number of units. Total housing units remain relatively stable over time, with a slight dip in 2019, followed by a rebound in 24 to 5,985 units. Overall vacancy is largely driven by seasonal units. Seasonal vacancy declines from 1,267 units in 2014 to 1,062 in 2019, before rising again to 1,250 in 2024. Non-seasonal vacancy remains stable in 2014 and 2019 at 330, then dropped sharply to 63 units by 2024. Vacancy trends reflect a housing stock heavily influenced by seasonal use. Overcrowding. 1 person per room is not recorded in any year, indicating no instances under the measure across the period. Severe overcrowding, 1.5 persons per room, increases notably in 2019 to 97 households after being present in 25 households in 2014, before dropping 0 by 2024. Overall overcrowding appears limited and episodic, with a temporary spike in severe overcrowding in 2019 that is not sustained.
This like the way we count this changed, the fact that like it spiked up so much and then came back down, just, it's interesting. That's something like it was the methodology for this, how this data was gathered, change at all?
That's a question for
Yeah.
River, I guess.
What's the question?
Just the fact that like it spiked up so much and then basically went almost like back to zero, like the way they counted like overcrowding change for that 2019 data point, it just, you wouldn't think to see it varied quite that much.
I would,
5 years.
if it was related to COVID and people
Well,
here,
the
but
COVID
the
would be
years are off. I don't know.
Yeah,
It does.
that's what I, it's almost wanted to get to the methodology or the data.
Housing unit types. Key takeaways, single family detached home remain the dominant housing type. Multifamily housing makes up a smaller but evolving share of the stock with growth in certain categories, particularly one unit attached. 20+ unit buildings, while other mid-size categories fluctuate or decline by 2024. Housing unit size, key takeaways. The share of housing stock is dominated by 3-bedroom units despite the number of unit declining through 2024. Housing stock continues to be concentrated in mid-size units, 2 to 4 bedrooms, which make up the majority of units overall. 4-bedroom units increased notably by 2024, surpassing 2014 levels and indicating a growing share or larger size family housing. Overall, the composition shows gradual rebalancing with growth concentrating in 1 and 4 bedroom units and a relative decline in 2-bedroom units. Housing unit age. The housing stock is predominantly older, with most units being built prior to 1990. Construction activity declined significantly in the 90s, with relatively few units built since 2010, and 63 units constructed after 2020. And Nick and I were talking about this with the presentation. We don't think it's the same units, not demo rebuild, so we're seeing a lot of houses get torn down and rebuilt, but it's the same units, and these numbers just don't make sense to us.
Yeah.
And that's something that. Housing unit condition. Housing deficiencies decline steadily over time, with both measures of deficiency decreasing from 2014 through 2024. Units lacking plumbing fall from 10 in 2014 to just 1 in 2024, while incomplete kitchen units follow the same pattern, also declining to 1 unit.
And we're not sure about the truth in those numbers. When you think about incomplete kitchen units, what are they talking about?
Or lack of plumbing. I mean, even seasonal residences
Have
have
plumbing.
plumbing, so. This
Yeah, I was
doesn't
just
make
gonna
sense
say that,
to us.
yeah.
Sewer and water,
Yeah,
it's such a small number of units anyway, too.
right.
Unless they're talking about like seasonal water service
You know, like
versus
the
year
water
round,
and sewers, I would,
so that's something they need to clarify.
it's water and stuff.
Housing tenure. Key takeaways, owner occupied housing remains the dominant tenure type and its share has increased over time. Renter occupied housing remains a smaller share and fluctuates over time, increasing in 2019 before declining again by 2024 to 672 units. The tenure structure becomes and remains strongly owner occupied with a shrinking rental opportunity over time. Assisted housing units. Assisted housing units increased over time, growing from 96 in 2014 to 162 in 2024, with the most of the growth occurring between 2014 and 2019. Deed restricted units also rise significantly over that period, increasing from 20 in 2014 to 78 in 2024, indicating expansion of permanently restricted affordable housing. Housing summary. Tightening but stable, with total units holding steady and non-seasonal vacancies dropping sharply, reflecting strong demand for year-round housing, even as seasonal homes continues to make up a large share of the stock. dominated by low-density owner-occupied single-family homes with detached units consistently representing the vast majority of housing and only limited inconsistent growth in multifamily or rental options. Characterized by a housing stock that is aging and slow to renew, as most homes were built before 1980 and new construction since 2010 remains minimal, signaling long-term reinvestment needs and limited opportunity for modern, diverse housing types. 10-year patterns show a strengthening ownership market with owner-occupied units rising in recent years while renter-occupied units decline, reinforcing a market that increasingly favors homeowners over. This
Questions?
is a question. So any thoughts or questions about?
So, I don't know when the big project went on behind Burger King. Those were all rentals, right? Or am I wrong?
No, they're rentals.
They're all rentals.
So wouldn't we seen a rise in rentals? Because of that development?
I think they need to revisit the numbers because there's
Okay.
186 units there. And I think it depends on when they picked it up
Okay.
with the
that's-
census too, and that I think was their disclaimer, and if we were 186 and 38 there, or are deed restricted, which kind of makes sense where it goes from 20 units and we have other developments to 38 or 78. There's something, but I think they need to revisit those numbers, or maybe it's just a skew from that census.
Okay.
When did those open?
They were CO'd at different times, so sometimes what happens is we'll permit something, but they don't really go on the books till the project's done, but it could be partial, so they could do a census and maybe 40 of the 186 have COs. So I think you gotta, put that into it as well.
Yeah,
I just have a question.
Yes. Back in the beginning of the section, it was probably around slide 19 or 20, you talked about an increase in 20-unit buildings. But I don't really recall any 20-unit buildings around that time unless it's Saybrook Station.
I mean, Saybrook Station, and unless they're calling it 20 units in a housing development, maybe Hanford.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, but there's no 20 units in each building. I think it was a few slides ahead of this, like around.
Yes. Page 13, housing unit type.
I can't see the page numbers on this.
Yeah, it's page 13.
There it is.
Housing unit type right there.
Yeah, right there. With growth in certain categories, particularly 1-unit attached and 20+ unit buildings.
Well, if you look at the total number of units, that's probably what they're considering when you look at Hanford and the station. The total
Okay.
number of units, not just one building.
Okay.
So maybe that really should say 20 unit developments versus building. That's something they should clarify if this is what they're.
I think that would be tough. I mean, when you're talking about units, but yeah, I know what you're saying.
Buildings versus.
So buildings makes you think 20 in a building. 20 plus, yeah.
I guess I did, but that's okay. Yeah. They should define what they mean by unit, yes. We'll get them to do that.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I have two comments. On page 11, total units and occupancy. It states that the overall vacancy is largely driven by seasonal units. My gut reaction is that limits economic activity in the town. And I'd wonder if they could tie that somehow to, is that a limiting factor?
When you say limiting factor to what?
Well, when the population shrinks for the winter, then there's less economic activity in town, right?
Well, they're only basing this on a population of 10,000. They're not basing it on summer population.
Right, but yeah, I mean, it's showing that that changes. But what I'm saying is, if the town was able to maintain the economic activity that the full population produces during the summer, when you have the least amount of vacancies, that was maintained throughout a full 12 months, there would be better economic activity for the town than having all these unused resources sit on the sidelines for 6, 8, 10 months. Yeah,
Well, I think when they're talking, I think, because Chris and I had a conversation about this when we were going over this afternoon. I think when you're looking at seasonal vacancy, a lot of it can be attributed to the fact that so many houses now don't get used in the winter. They're only used in the summer.
Right.
And I mean, so it's not available to the housing stock.
correct. Right, and that's kind of exactly my point.
Right.
And then therefore, there's no one in the restaurants, there's no one in Main Street, there's less, maybe not no one, but there's less.
Yeah, there's
And of
like,
course, you still have people come from out of town.
Right.
And all that to consider, but I guess that's kind of my question, is there a way to quantify how much the vacancies reduce the economic activity of the town?
I don't know if it's, I'm curious, the seasonal stuff was interesting, you had like this, but I'm not so much economic, but does that reduce like the number of available units we have
It
at
does.
times of the year? And just
yes,
getting, like,
That-
understanding that more was a
Yeah,
question.
that it definitely does.
Right.
Yeah, like non-seasonal vacancy says 300, but seasonal was like 12, I mean, we have like 1,000 houses out there that could be occupied,
Right,
but aren't.
Right.
Because they're only in use for 3 months.
Right, could be putting kids in the school, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, I also think they need to clarify, there's houses that are seasonal because they can't be converted to year-round, they need to clarify that these are year-round homes, is that what they're talking about, that are seasonally occupied, I'm assuming that. But we also have seasonal homes that have to remain seasonal homes, or could be converted, so I think they need to clean that up.
Yeah,
Yes, especially in our town, like, the definition of what seasonal means and how they're counted.
right.
Yeah.
A number of homes are rented, what do they call them?
Academically.
Academic rentals.
And is that even captured in this? Because we all know there's a number of those that happen, that would bump up the number, that would be part of that. And the other part that I didn't see anything in here was, did they take into consideration on anything on ADUs? There's been a concerted effort over the last number of years.
Well, I think when you look at housing type, they do talk about that, because they talk about, it being detached housing. And I think some of the new housing that was built is ADUs. When they talk about the 63 units that were built after 2020.
But it's also attached as well as detached.
Right. That I don't think is taken into consideration,
Should ADUs be
unless they're
equal
considering it
separately?
as a family.
I think they need to clarify that if you have an attached or detached ADU, is it a two-family?
Yeah,
How are they classifying it?
Yeah, like how those show up in this housing
Right.
unit.
yeah, we have that as a clarification for that. I think, Mark, to your point about, academic rentals, I think you'll see some of that in the decline in 2014 to 2019, when it went from 1267 to 1062, and it's risen again. I think there was a decline at some point with people not doing the academic, they're back again.
Yeah, we don't know how many academic
Right,
rentals
you know,
it is,
right,
but from what I'm hearing, most academic rentals are rented.
Yeah.
Hard to find them.
it is very hard to find that. And it's usually done year after year, type of thing, yeah.
I also suspect that the cost of the houses now, some people are not, they just sold the houses and, you know, they're no longer academically
Right,
rented.
Right.
They cashed out,
Yeah,
they're year-round houses again,
especially after 2019.
you know.
Yeah.
Not renters.
Question. Where would, year-round houses that are people's second homes count in this? Would that be, A seasonal vacancy, because I have a lot of neighbors that,
That's what we think.
That's what we're thinking.
but they have viable year-round homes that are just sitting vacant, which is so sad.
Yes, but that's what we're considering seasonal vacancies.
Okay.
Yeah.
So not just the cottages, but all, any vacant house, even cottages and.
When you say cottage, do you mean a cottage that can't be used year round?
Right,
That's why we're looking for clarification to what they mean by a seasonal
Okay.
vacancy. Because we know we don't have that many truly seasonal homes in town. I think it's fractional, isn't it?
I don't remember the last, I mean, it's definitely diminished.
Yeah.
It's all determined by, how many the Connecticut water company turns off.
Yeah,
No, I changed it now, so.
Did they?
what was it?
Yeah, so it goes through the selectman's office and that's a whole other issue because they don't shut the water off. So someone could go through and get the water turned on in their seasonal house and violate the ordinance. So that's a whole other thing to deal with.
I just had more just like a data, like the data that's on this slide, like I'd love to see that like almost matched up with what's on like 6 of the household side. Just so you can see them on like, similar chart format, like next to them, like, if we have this.
So you'd
number-
like to see,
Just to kind of, if we have, 1,800 2-people households, we don't have 1,800 1 or 2 bedroom, like how's that? Are people in the wrong size?
The housing unit size?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's another thing that Chris and I were talking about, because you see an increase in the number of 4-bedroom units. And we know people don't have large household sizes. But I think you're seeing a larger number of people where 2 people are working from homes and now they need 2 offices, dedicated office space.
Yeah.
So now they're using 2 of those bedrooms as offices. So yes, that's a good question.
Just kind of see, what the.
Yeah.
And I guess the same thing on the 2019 data too, 'cause like we've like lost 300 4-bedroom homes in 2019, but then got 500 more.
Yeah.
So. Same like, where's the data coming from? It's being kind of the same way.
Yeah.
Just,
It is a fascinating shift in the housing
Yeah.
unit size. And you see that.
well, I guess if this is a survey, is it just depending on who they're mailing it to and who
Yeah.
responds as well, so.
no, this is based on census data.
Yeah, they actually looking at like the houses that they're asking a person who lives at a house, like, what does your house look like?
Yeah, if you how you fill out the census data or how you answer the census taker, yeah.
For people.
Yeah.
Answer the side of their house wrong, we're making that.
That's right.
I had a similar question about the housing unit type, where, you have this one that shows all the vast majority of single units.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we talked earlier about the demographics shifting, page 13, with the.
If you just want me to show and tell me the page.
That's all right.
Okay, that's good. And so it strikes me that this inventory of unit types doesn't serve a demographic that's shifting to older couples for the most part, or even singles, right?
Well, true, but if you look at some of the data, older people are living in larger homes. They're not moving into smaller homes. So it's hard to see that shift to a smaller 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom home. They're not necessarily.
But this is just like a unit, like a 4-bedroom house and a 1-bedroom apartment, both count as one
Right.
unit on this chart.
Yes,
Right.
well, I think it's fascinating because in 2014, it doesn't really show much, and then in 2019, we have 0.7% are mobile homes, and then in 2024, they all disappeared.
Right.
So I guess they got hitched up and taken out of town.
Well, I guess the thing too is what are they considering a mobile home? Is it a manufactured
that's
home?
the other kind of.
So we should ask them
Right.
why that fell off.
Or did they just, they're not that many, they just didn't survey them in
I mean,
2019.
That could be all a Yankee Bill.
Right, and then, so just on the unit types, I'm interested if they could provide us with some type of community benchmark for the demographics that we have. What should the unit housing stock look like? Kind of what would be best practices for matching this skewed demographic with housing unit types?
Yeah, I think right now they're just asking us to, this is what they've compiled.
Yeah.
And they're asking us at this point just to say, does this make sense to you?
Yeah, looking for.
So we're gonna have more workshops like this, and
Yeah.
that this is our first one.
I think it's more getting an understanding of what they mean by unit.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
mobile home.
And yeah, and mobile
I mean,
home,
this mobile home mean it's sitting on the land that's leased?
or it's
Do they
manufactured, right?
own is it on wheels? Does it move? But, you know,
Or has,
well, yeah,
a metal frame underneath it.
right,
Right. All right, we do have to move on.
yeah.
I don't mean to be pushing.
Do.
But
Page 20, okay. Wow.
let's talk about jobs and workforce. This will talk a little bit to Dennis's point about economics. So look at total jobs, the job type, the wages, our resident workforce and our non-resident workforce. And this will sort of key us into maybe some of the housing we might need to look at bringing in. So total jobs. The total jobs remain stable over the last decade, shifting only slightly. It's a 3% decline. Resident workers decreased steadily from 2014 to 2023, with the most notable drop occurring after 2019. And then Old Saybrook, I think everyone understands, relies heavily on in-commuters, with 84% of its workforce living outside of town. If you look at the industry, the top 5 industries in Old Saybrook should be of no surprise: retail, trade, accommodation, food service, healthcare and social assistance, educational services, professional, scientific and technical services. I don't know why it doesn't say real estate. Accommodation and food services has grown substantially, rising from 847 jobs in 2014 to 1,043 in 2023. Of course, that's looking at our increased reliance on tourism and hospitality. And retail trade remains Old Saybrook's largest employer, consistently supporting 1,100 to 1,300 jobs. The age of our workforce. The 55 plus group grows steadily in local jobs and remains high among resident workers, indicating a delayed retirement. And I would also say the cost of living, rising dependency on older labor force. The 30 to 54 group remains the largest group, but it's declining steadily among both residents and job holders, suggesting a thinner middle generation, limited replenishment of middle career talent. And then ages 29 and under have declined in both categories, indicating fewer young adults living in Old Saybrook and few younger workers participating in Old Saybrook-based jobs.
This is the people who live in Old Saybrook, not the people who work in Old
Why does
Saybrook.
it say Cromwell?
So
yeah,
yeah, that's a typo on page 23, the Cromwell should have been Old Saybrook. And the other thing that Nick and I discussed briefly is if you work out of town, does that mean your paycheck comes from out of town, but you're sitting in your bedroom in Old Saybrook?
Yeah, working from
Working.
home.
You know, what does that mean anymore? I mean, you may work in Old Saybrook every day, but you're just not in an office and in your employer.
Right.
Well, I was gonna, cause like slide 22, I think that's like the jobs that exist in Old Saybrook, but
That's-
but in 23, these are people who live in Old Saybrook.
These are the people that live in Old Saybrook.
Okay.
And then monthly earnings, both Old Saybrook jobs and resident workforce saw a steady drop in workers earning $12.50 or less, indicating fewer very low paying roles or upward wage movement. And Old Saybrook residents hold more high earning jobs than number of high earning jobs located in the town itself. That, of course, those are the people that are leaving town to collect a paycheck rather than working in town itself. Whether they're actually leaving town, we don't know. Middle wage jobs in Old Saybrook are shrinking faster than middle wage residents, suggesting that mid-wage opportunities locally are declining and residents may be moving up into higher earning roles elsewhere. So the commuter shed, and I don't know why they use the word shed. They were not residential
Why
shed.
does a commuter shed mean?
Yes.
Area.
Top residential locations for Old Saybrook workers is Old Saybrook and London, Norwich, and then in 2023, Middletown.
This is where the workers come from.
Yes, this is where the workers come from. So even in years when Old Saybrook ranks first, its workers make up only 3% of the total, showing that the town depends on in-commuters rather than local residents to staff its jobs. And despite small changes in order, the same towns appear repeatedly in the top three. Which is, I don't think, a big surprise to anyone. And then for the Old Saybrook workforce, the Old Saybrook residents primarily work outside of town, with over 80% of residents employed elsewhere. And only a small share of residents work locally, and that number is declining. It's well under 1,000 now. And then workforce jobs by industry, manufacturing is slowly declining after a mid-decade rise. And then healthcare is the town's largest industry, consistent employing more workers than any other sector, and remains the strongest anchor of town. So the top five are healthcare, education, retail, manufacturing, and accommodation. And then the top work destinations for Old Saybrook residents consistently are Old Saybrook, New Haven, and Hartford. And while Old Saybrook remains the single largest work location, the combined poll of New Haven and Hartford demonstrates that residents rely heavily on large employment hubs outside of the town. This reinforces Old Saybrook's role as a residential community with strong outbound commuter patterns. And this adds to our area median income, and why it's grown significantly since 2014 to 2023, indicating overall strong income growth in the region. And rising AMI thresholds suggest increasing cost of living pressures as income levels required to qualify for affordability categories have shifted upward for time. So in summary, Old Saybrook's job base is stable, but increasingly reliant on people from out of town. The workforce is aging and gradually shifting towards higher earning jobs, with steady growth in workers earning more than $3,333 per month, with a long-term decline in younger workers. Local employment is anchored in service sector industries, especially healthcare, retail, and food service, with retail remaining the largest and most stable. And residents increasingly work outside of Old Saybrook, with only 10% of the residents' workforce employed in town in 2023, with reliance on commuting. Questions, comments about what we just talked about regarding jobs and workforce?
On the slide 25, the commuter shed one.
Yeah.
Obviously, most of our workers come in, but it's like the percentages only add up to like 6%. Does that mean the other like 90% of workers in town come from not these three places?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which probably means it's more, let's take 3-4% is like the largest one for growing workers, like not only from one town.
20 pounds, yeah.
Yeah, that was my, like, I was curious, like, how far away do people come? Like, what are the,
Well,
their demographics?
Anecdotally talking to some of the wait staff and bartenders, they're coming from as far as Hartford, Farmington, Springfield, New Haven for these jobs, but they're making good money.
Hey, Nick.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought I saw a few slides back that healthcare is like the biggest sector, but then on slide 30, you said retail trade is the highest sector. So,
Yeah, I know. I gotta talk to them about that, because that's,
All right, so can we just, so Joanne's gonna kind of put together the summary, so slide. We need the slide.
I'll get those for Joanne. I know what he's talking about. But
yeah, it was
yes,
slide 30 on retail trade, and it was before that for the medical.
Yeah.
And the only other comment, and maybe it's later in the deck, but is it worth characterizing like how many commute via the train? Is that gatherable data?
That would be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, like I look at also that like if most of our residents work elsewhere, most of our workers live elsewhere, it's like primed for some kind of commuting solution that doesn't involve everybody driving their cars in that town every day. None of us like traffic.
Yeah, it might be beyond the housing issue, but we do talk about transit-oriented districts, so.
Maybe curious about some of like the household size data of the commuting in workers, like are they 2 and 3 families, like what ages are they?
Yep,
Are they the missing middle families that are leaving our town and go live somewhere else, but they have to come back here to work anyway?
right. I think it's interesting data. I think it needs some work. Needs some tuning of it.
Mainly it's like surprisingly different from some of the stuff we've seen in years past.
Yes.
Some of the different transit-oriented representations.
Yeah.
Yes, trends are holding steady, which is good or bad, a different thing, but this has been a problem that's not brand new. So it still needs to be figured out. What the problem is, what the solution is. That's why we're up here.
Do you think it'd be helpful for a little clarification on how the data was collected? That was one of the things they asked. It seems like we're kind of bouncing from
Yeah.
different sources and maybe we're using local terms for seasonal or year-round or units. Maybe a little bit more.
Well, some of this, like, is it, do we send out a survey to a resident and ask them questions versus like data we could pull from actual, data you have, Chris, this is data, the actual number of houses we have versus like.
So
How
this
does this
is,
line up
yes,
with what we actually know?
so this is one of a series of
Yeah.
work. So this is kind of general information that they put together. And they're looking to see, okay. Is this what you're seeing, these trends, what are you seeing here? That we're gonna get into the housing needs assessment, but we're trying to kind of do this baseline of what's going on. So this is a way for us to look at, okay, obviously there's some things we believe we don't understand what 20+ units is. We don't understand
Seasonal. vacancies.
seasonal in some of the units. So this is for us to get local context or, what happened to the mobile homes. So this has been oversight. Was it 10 people camping, somewhere and they moved on, or are they talking about manufactured homes when they say mobile?
Yeah, something like consistency and like, we're talking units or rooms or bedrooms.
Because they are looking at it as a regional
Yeah.
thing, so they're trying to make it all fit. And they just need to share with us what they're defining, so we can make our data fit into that and our understanding.
So right now, the phase 1, we're going through, establishing a shared understanding of regional and municipal housing. They're gonna update the data, integrate statutory requirements, and then the regional data trends. Okay, that's, I think, what we just got now. Working role is to review trends and confirm understanding, identifying missing context or major data gaps, which I think we pointed out. Yeah, certain things that have to be revisited. And then the next thing, I believe, will be a similar workshop for us in Old Saybrook, is to agree how housing need is calculated for our town and the region, and will be another working group at that time to participate in a workshop. They're saying that would be in July. Obviously, we're probably looking at December if we were supposed to be doing this in June, but you never know. I do have to say the region did get a lot handed to them with the last session, and a lot of deadlines and a lot of things that were not clear. So they are moving along, but I think the timeline may be stretched out.
This is regional, but, and I'm sure it's probably not available, but how do we compare to the surrounding towns? So is there a pattern in the other towns that is weak in Saybrook? Or is there a pattern that shows Saybrook stronger than the other towns? Because one of the driving factors for any type of affordable housing is just the cost of real estate. And I think that becomes prohibitive. People come in to work in town that would love to live in town, but they can't afford to buy in town. So how does that weigh into that process too?
I think we're just gonna evolve and look at it. I mean, it's interesting because our region includes Middletown.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many differences between larger towns and our town.
Yeah.
So many similarities with some of our neighbors, but we're kind of more of a regional hub too, compared to Chester or Deep River. So I think we'll continue to do this. our housing task force members will continue to update us and provide information that we share. And then we'll have several more of these working group discussions, and I think it's kind of valuable to have it with both planning and zoning, I know. I mean, if we get to the point we do implement the plan, the zoning commission obviously is gonna have a major role in, adopting regulations, so I think the more we can try to meet together, not that we need any extra meetings. But, I know Nick wants extra meetings, but we'll try to coordinate things together and stay on the same page as much as we can.
Nice job, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
And you got it in before seven?
Alright, so
Yeah.
I guess we started off, so I guess the motion's to adjourn at 6:50.
56,
Or
yeah.
we adjourned at 6:57.